Welcome to Books and Bubbly. This is the playlist where I review books that I get all bubbly about while drinking some bubbly. And today I'm going to be talking about Holidays on Ice by David Sedaris, as Sedaris is one of my favorite creative nonfiction writers ever. I mean, I have driven hours to see him to do a reading, and no one, absolutely no one, is allowed to borrow my copy of Naked as it is signed by him. You will have to pry it out of my cold, dead fingers if you want that book. I just think his work is hilarious. I really love his snarky, self-deprecating, and dry sense of humor. It's just amazing. I can always reread his books, and I know I'm going to have a great time. The Holidays on Ice is a fantastic little collection of holiday themed stories, and I read it every single year when we make the drive to go see family for Christmas. It was honestly only made better as a few years ago my sister and I went to the Santaland Diaries. That was essentially a one-man play of his essay, The Santaland Diaries, and it's about the time that he worked as an elf at Macy's, and it's hilarious. The show was so funny. I mean, I was crying. I was laughing so hard as his story was brought to life on stage. So every time I read that chapter in Holidays on Ice, I have great memories of the show, and I can totally hear that actor recreating David Sedaris' voice and just his manner of speaking. So if you're looking for a really funny collection of stories centered around the holidays, I cannot recommend this book highly enough. It's small, it's a very quick read, and it's just a fun, festive little book, especially if you like that kind of humor. Like my People I Want to Punch in the Throat video, I think I'm just going to read some excerpts that make me laugh, as I love rereading this at Christmas time. And again, you just have to go out and get your own copy just to see how funny it is. But I do have a few little sections tabbed that I do want to read, so here we go. So this is in the Santaland Diaries section. And again, he was working as an elf at Macy's. I spent a few hours in the maze with Puff, a young elf from Brooklyn. We were standing near the lollipop forest when we realized that Santa is an anagram for Satan. Father Christmas, or the devil. So close, but yet so far. We imagined a Satan land where visitors would wade through steaming pools of human blood and feces before arriving at the gates of hell, where a hideous imp in a singed velvet costume would take them by the hand and lead them towards Satan. Once we thought of it, we couldn't get it out of our minds. Overhearing the customers, we would substitute the word Satan for the word Santa. What do you think, Michael? Do you think Macy's has the real Satan? Don't forget to thank Satan for the baby alive he gave you last year. I love Satan. Who doesn't? Everyone loves Satan. And then this is also from Santaland Diaries. This afternoon, I worked as an exit elf, telling people in a loud voice, "This way out of Santaland." A woman was standing at one of the cash registers, paying for her idea of a picture, while her son lay beneath her, kicking and heaving, having a tantrum. The woman said, "Riley, if you don't start behaving yourself, Santa's not going to bring you any of those toys you asked for." The child said, "He is too going to bring me the toys, liar. He already told me." The woman grabbed my hand and said, "You there, elf, tell Riley here that if he doesn't start behaving immediately, then Santa's going to change his mind and bring him coal for Christmas." I said that Santa no longer traffics in coal. Instead, if you're bad, he comes to your house and steals things. I told Riley that if he didn't behave himself, Santa was going to take away his TV and all his electrical appliances and leave him in the dark. All your appliances, including the refrigerator. Your food is going to spoil and smell bad. It's going to be so cold and dark where you are. Man, Riley, are you ever going to suffer? You're going to wish you never heard the name Santa. The woman got a worried look on her face and said, "All right, that's enough." I said, "He's going to take your car and your furniture and all the towels and blankets and leave you with nothing." The mother said, "No, that's enough, really." Still in the Santaland Diaries. I photo elfed all day for a variety of Santas, and it struck me that many of the parents don't allow their children to speak at all. A child sits upon Santa's lap, and the parents say, "All right now, Amber, tell Santa what you want. Tell him you want a baby alive and my pretty ballerina and that winter coat you saw in the catalog." The parents name the gifts they have already bought. They don't want to hear the word pony or television set, so they talk through the entire visit, placing words in the child's mouth. When the child hops off the lap, the parents address their children, each and every time, with, "What do you say to Santa?" The child says, "Thank you, Santa." It is sad, because you would like to believe that everyone is unique, and then they disappoint you every time by being exactly the same, asking for the same things, reciting the exact same lines as though they have been handed a script. All of the adults ask for a gold card or a BMW, and they rock with laughter, thinking they are the first person brazen enough to request such pleasures. Santa says, "I'll see what I can do." Couples over the age of 50 all say, "I don't want to sit on your lap, Santa. I'm afraid I might break it." How do you break a lap? How did so many people get the idea to say the exact same thing? I went to a store on the Upper West Side. The store is like a museum of natural history, where everything is for sale. Every taxidermic or skeletal animal that roams the earth is represented in this shop, and because of that, it is popular. I went with my brother last weekend. Near the cash register was a bowl of glass eyes and a sign reading, "Do not hold these eyes, or do not hold these glass eyes up against your own eyes. The rough stem can cause injury." I talked to the fellow behind the counter, and he said, "It's the same thing every time. First they hold up the eyes, and then they go for the horns. I'm sick of it." It disturbed me that, until I saw the sign, my first impulse was to hold those eyes up to my own. I thought it might be a laugh riot. All of us take pride and pleasure in the fact that we are unique, but I'm afraid that when all is said and done, the police are right. It all comes down to fingerprints. And then, still in Santaland, there was a big Sesame Street Live extravaganza over at Madison Square Garden, so thousands of people decided to make a day of it and go straight from Sesame Street to Santa. We were packed today, absolutely packed, and everyone was cranky. Once the line gets long, we break it up into 4 different lines, because anyone in their right mind would leave if they knew it would take over 2 hours to see Santa. 2 hours! You could see a movie in 2 hours. Standing in a 2-hour line makes people worry that they're not living in a democratic nation. People stand in line for 2 hours, and they go over the edge. I was sent into the hallway to direct the second phase of the line. The hallway was packed with people, and all of them seemed to stop me with a question. Which way to the down escalator? Which way to the elevator? The patio restaurant? Gift wrap? The women's restroom? Trim a tree? There was a line for Santa and a line for the women's bathroom. And one woman, after asking me a dozen questions already, asked, "Which is the line for the women's bathroom?" I shouted that I thought it was the line with all the women in it. She said, "I'm going to have you fired." I had 2 people say that to me today. "I'm going to have you fired." Go ahead, be my guest. I'm wearing a green velvet costume. It doesn't get any worse than this. Who do these people think they are? "I'm going to have you fired." And I wanted to lean over and say, "I'm going to have you killed." All right. So the next excerpt is from the story called Dinah, the Christmas Whore. And so David is older, and one of his elder sisters works at like the same restaurant he does. She gets a call from a coworker, Dinah, and goes to rescue her. And so she's bringing Dinah back to the house. And so she brings her home. "Mom, this is Dinah. Dinah, this is my mother." "Oh, thank goodness," my mother said, helping our guest out of her shoddy rabbit jacket. "For a moment there, I was afraid you were one of those damned carolers. I wasn't expecting company, so you'll have to excuse the way I look." The way she looked? Dinah's mascara had smeared, causing her to resemble a ridiculously costumed panda. And here my mother was apologizing for the way she looked? I took her aside for a moment. "Whore," I whispered. "That lady is a whore." I'm not certain what reaction I was after, but shock would have done quite nicely. Instead, my mother said, "Well then, we should probably offer her a drink." She left me standing in the dining room, listening as she presented the woman with a long list of options delivered in alphabetical order. We've got beer, bourbon, gin, ouzo, rum, scotch, vodka, whiskey, wine, and some thick yellow something or other in an unmarked bottle. And so then they're asking her a bunch of questions. And woken by the noise, my father wandered up from the basement, where he'd been sitting in his underwear, drowsing in front of the television. His approach generally marked the end of a party. "What the hell are you doing in here at 2 o'clock in the morning?" he'd shout. It was his habit to add anywhere from 3 to 4 hours to the actual time in order to strengthen the charge of disorderly conduct. The sun could be shining, and he'd claim it was midnight. Point to the clock, and he'd only throw up his hands to say, "Bullshit, go to bed." This evening, he was in a particularly foul mood, and announced his arrival well before entering the room. "What are you, tap dancing up there? You want to put on a show, do ya? Well, the theater's closed for the night. Take your act on the road. It's 4 o'clock in the morning, goddammit." We turned instinctively to our mother. "Don't come into the kitchen," she called. "We don't want you to see your Christmas present." "My present? Really?" His voice softened to a mew. "Carry on, then." We listened to his footsteps as he padded down the hallway to his room, and then we covered our mouths, laughing until our sight was watery. Swallows of cake revisited our throats, and our faces, reflected in the dark windows, were flushed and vibrant. And then he just kind of goes on to talk about, certain family moments that you'll never forget. And he's like, "Pretty sure we were the only family in the neighborhood with a prostitute in our kitchen." From this moment on, the phrase, "ho, ho, ho," would take on a whole different meaning. And I, along with the rest of my family, could appreciate it in our own clannish way. It suddenly occurred to me, just like that. And then the last one is Jesus shaves. And so it's while he's living in France with his partner, and he's taking French classes, so they only speak in French, and talking about holidays. And so the teacher, "And what does one do on Easter?" she asked. "Would anyone like to tell us?" The Italian nanny was attempting to answer when the Moroccan student interrupted, shouting, "Excuse me, but what's an Easter?" It would seem that despite having grown up in a Muslim country, she would have heard it mentioned once or twice. But no. "I mean it," she said. "I have no idea what you people are talking about." Our teacher then called upon the rest of us to explain. The Poles led the charge to the best of their ability. "It is," said one, "a party for the little boy of God who calls himself Jesus, and—" She faltered, and her fellow countryman came to her aid. "He call himself Jesus, and then he die one day on 2 morsels of lumber." The rest of the class jumped in, offering bits of information that would have given the Pope an aneurysm. "He die one day, and then he go above my head to live with your father. He weared of himself the long hair, and after he die, the first day he come back here for to say hello to the peoples. He nice, the Jesus. He make the good things. And on the Easter, we be sad, because somebody make him dead today." Part of the problem had to do with the vocabulary. Simple nouns such as cross and resurrection were beyond our grasp, let alone such complicated reflexive phrases as "to give of yourself your only begotten son." Faced with the challenge of explaining the cornerstone of Christianity, we did what any self-respecting group of people might do. We talked about food instead. "Easter is a party for to eat of the lamb," the Italian nanny explained. "One, too, may eat of the chocolate." "And who brings the chocolate?" the teacher asked. I knew the word, so I raised my hand, saying, "The rabbit of Easter. He bring of the chocolate." "A rabbit?" The teacher, assuming I'd used the wrong word, positioned her index fingers on top of her head, wriggling them as though they were ears. "You mean one of these? A rabbit rabbit?" "Well, sure," I said. "He come in the night when one sleep on a bed. With a hand, he have a basket and foods." The teacher sighed and shook her head. As far as she was concerned, I had just explained everything that was wrong with my country. No, she said. "Here in France, the chocolate is brought by a big bell that flies in from Rome." I called for a timeout. "But how do the bell know where you live?" "Well," she said, "how does a rabbit?" It was a decent point, but at least a rabbit has eyes. That's a start. Rabbits can move from place to place, while most bells can only go back and forth, and they can't even do that on their own power. On top of that, the Easter Bunny has character. He's someone you'd like to meet and shake hands with. A bell has all the personality of a cast iron skillet. It's like saying that come Christmas, a magic dustpan flies in from the North Pole, led by 8 flying cinder blocks. Who wants to stay up all night so they can see a bell? And why fly one in from Rome when they've got more bells than they know what to do with right here in Paris? That's the most implausible aspect of the whole story, as there's no way the bells of France would allow a foreign worker to fly in and take their jobs. That Roman bell would be lucky to get work cleaning up after a French bell's dog, and even then, he'd need papers. It just didn't add up. So, again, those were little excerpts from David Sedaris' Holidays on Ice. Just a really fun, feel-good, holiday read if you just want a good laugh. Again, it's very quick. I probably read through this in an hour on the car ride when we're driving. So I'm telling you, you have to go get a copy of this book and keep it on your shelves for the holiday season. It is the perfect way to kick off the Christmas season, the holiday season, whatever you celebrate. It's just tons of fun and tons of great little stories. So if you have recommendations for like other funny books or essays centered around the holidays, please share those recommendations in the comments below. Otherwise, thanks for watching and happy holidays!